What if I told you that the world was actually incredibly simple? The world seems very complicated, but that's because we are looking at the most highest level of abstraction of the world, and that is everything that's around us. What I'm talking about when I say that the world is simple is that all of these very complicated things that we see follow just a few sets of very basic principles. And if we understand those principles, then we can understand almost everything else in the world. My first experience with this kind of idea was in the field of physics. It's why I decided to pursue physics in university, is because there are very complicated things, which in high school usually starts off with the motion of objects, right? The motion of objects seems to be something that is very complicated, but it's governed by just a few very simple rules. Newton was one of those people who decided to figure out the least amount of principles that these things have to follow, and he came up with 3 laws. That is a very, very simple framework to work with, but when you apply all of those principles, then you can start to get very complex things. This is how the world works, okay? Even in the field of mathematics. You might think that math is super, super duper complicated. You know, you can look at the longest math equation in the world and be like, this shit is complicated. I don't even know how to start approaching it. But if I start to break down these concepts, then you see that a lot of the very complex parts of math are built up off of very few principles. In philosophy, I believe we call these principles some axioms, just things that we take to be true. Everything else that comes out of this can be derived and traced back to these very few axioms that we follow. Now, why does this matter to anyone's life? The real reason why I bring this up is because this principle of things seeming really complicated but actually being more simple when you break it down, this is the most important life principle that you can ever learn. All of this is just logic. Logic is probably the most important creation ever of mankind. Logic is the thing that sets us apart from the wild animals out there in the world. It's probably some sort of byproduct of consciousness in some way, but what logic is it gives us a framework for reliably navigating through different ideas. So we can create a couple of ideas, right? For instance, we can create something called like a category of person. So we can say that I'm a person and someone that looks like me is also a person. We can also create a category of mortal and immortal. And if I say all people are mortal, and then I say John is a person, then you can conclude from that statement, from my axioms that I set up and this statement that I've given you, that John is mortal, because John is a person and all people are mortal. That is the most basic level of what logic is. It's being given some premises and then given some statement and being able to apply those premises to this statement in order to reach a conclusion. This is what lit ancient Greece on fire with Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, all these people, and this is what served as the foundation for mathematicians like Pythagoras, all the way to Isaac Newton, all the way to Albert Einstein. This is what laid down the path for them to be able to make the great discoveries that they did. Logical thinking is the most essential process to being a human. Why is this so important? 2 things. First thing, it's important for your own life. When you are faced with problems in your life or faced with any situation, it's very easy to get extremely overwhelmed. The world out there has so many different systems that are clashing and intertwining with one another. If you look at a highway system, right? Take a little snippet of an LA highway system and all the cars that are going on it, and you're going to get incredibly overwhelmed very quickly with the amount of visual noise that there is. But if you can look at that snippet and you can break it down to its most essential elements of what is a road, where are the destinations that I'm trying to go to, let me start linking it up, then that complicated highway system becomes a lot more simple because you made it from something complex to something very simple. Same thing goes for any problems in your life, whether that be a very serious problem of like, I'm about to lose my housing and I'm about to have no home, or I'm about to go from rank diamond to rank gold in Rocket League. These 2 things have the same thing in relation, which is that they can be easily navigated with logic because they are run by very simple systems. The economic model, all right, all of the economy of the world, if you want to make it super simple, it's just supply and demand, and you're just looking at the relationship between those two. Everything, every single thing in life has a very simple system that governs it. And the whole pursuit of science, mathematics, technology, engineering, all of these disciplines, their whole pursuit is looking at the complicated things that appear in front of us and trying to distill what is the most essential parts of it so we can get at the very simple, fundamental, foundational framework that all of this is built on. Now, it's important for navigating your own life, but two, it's important for navigating the world and interacting with others. There is a serious logic crisis in the 21st century, and I'm not saying that to be facetious or whatever. I'm not saying that to be like, I'm so much smarter than everyone else. People now don't live in a common shared reality. If you ever go online on Twitter or Instagram or wherever you go to, even the news, if you look on the news, okay, you go to Infowars.com, you go to CNN.com, you might be seeing a lot of things and thinking, wow, a lot of people are seeing the same things around the world, but they're coming to very different conclusions. Now remember, from the basic setup from this whole video, you have premises, you have a statement, and then you use logic to connect those two and come to a conclusion, right? It seems like we're all coming to different conclusions, and that means that there's a problem with how people are applying their logic. Now, the cool thing about logic is that it is supposed to be independent of any observer or person who's using the system of logic, right? It's supposed to apply for everyone because it's that fundamental of a concept. It's so universal, it governs literally everything that works in our world. So when people are coming to different conclusions, it's not that logic itself is something that is bad. It's more like some people's logic versus other people's ways of applying logic are just not right. Or people aren't working off the same premises, the same fundamental starting points. So the thing is that logic is very hard. It's very difficult, okay? That's why some of the smartest people in the world, what they value is your ability to think. And hidden in that statement of your ability to think is your ability to have a logical system. What's going on now is that social media, in particular, the platform of X, thank you Elon Musk, has now become a place where people can circumvent this whole hard process of seeing something, having some fundamental foundational beliefs, and then using their ability to think and reason to logic themselves to some sort of conclusion. Now, conclusions that you reach aren't really based on your fundamental core values and your ability to think. What they're based off of is the fundamental core values of a very few small group of people who have a lot of influence online. Influencers, right, is the word. It's based off of whatever conclusions they come to. And the thing that is the most treacherous about all of this is that those few influencers, you might want to rely on those few influencers because you're like, I don't want to have to do all this hard work of like complicated thinking every single time I see something. I just want to trust that someone is going to be able to do that same thinking for me because they share my same beliefs, whether or not they're conservative, they're liberal, they're centrist, they're a communist, whatever position that they have, I relate with that position. So I hope that they're doing the hard work of thinking for me so I can just parrot whatever opinion they have. Here's the crazy part. We live in a world that is mostly fueled by money. Right? That's kind of the blood that makes everything flow in this world. And now you can have those influencers who parrot a talking point that isn't quite based on a premise of like core foundational beliefs for like human rights and equality. Now their premise is what makes me as much money as possible. So now when they're given some sort of topic, they're thinking, my core beliefs are I want to make a lot of money. The things that make money online are the things that get the most engagement. The easiest form of engagement to get is usually anger or sadness. So what is the best way that I can make this topic make a certain group of people as angry as possible and make them agree with me? Boom. They publish that online, they get a bunch of engagement, they rile up a whole group of people, and they get their money like they wanted from the start. This was something that was fairly predictable with the advent of the internet. Again, if you have a logical way of thinking, it's very easy to see how certain incentive structures that exist in the online world, combined with the way that people engage with things online, what gets people's attention, throw in some money with that, it's very easy to see the logical conclusion of how all of this can become really bad. Now, for a long time, not many people were online, so all of this crazy online hubbubaloo was centered on a very small part of the world population. 2020, a pandemic hits that keeps all of us inside, and now our main way of moving through the world is entirely digital. 2024, during a certain presidency run, Elon Musk buys Twitter, turns it into X, and starts explicitly supporting Donald Trump, who, once he gets into office, starts explicitly supporting Tesla and basically funding Tesla, which is supposed to be a private company. Flash forward to now, artificial intelligence has become super on the rise. There's a bunch of bots online that can just parrot these talking points and start influencing a large population of people to start believing in things that aren't even true, that have no logical basis, that do not exist in reality. And how are they letting this happen? It's because a lot of people don't want to do the hard work of thinking. A lot of technologies today are trying to circumvent that process of thinking in people. Artificial intelligence technologies are very useful. I use it a lot in my personal life. What they aren't useful for is thinking for you. You have to do that hard work of thinking for yourself, or else you lose it. Your brain, your critical thinking skills start to atrophy. Your ability to apply logic to certain situations starts to go down. And a large group of the population have so many other problems in their life that it seems like their systems of logic are not the number one priority for them to focus on. And that's true for a lot of people. A lot of people don't have the privilege of worrying about how I can get my critical thinking skills up and sit down and start, going through some logical exercises for hours at a time, all right? Some people were dealt a very bad hand early on in life, didn't get a good education growing up, are stuck in a situation and have to make the most of it. The most evil part of this whole thing is that they put their trust in a couple of people that they see online who they think share their same values. And so they believe that while they're focused on trying to get their own life together, that their opinions on other things that are happening in the world, they can trust these influencers to do the thinking for them, to be upstanding, to have a good moral foundation, and to tell them basically what is the quote-unquote correct thing to view if you share the same values that they share. This is not what's happening. The Western world is slowly going into a decay because a lot of people are losing the ability to even sift through all of the complex noise and everything that's going on. And spoiler alert, it's only going to get worse. Once artificial intelligence becomes something that is on everyone's devices, once you are hit with even an inkling, a little sprinkle of having to think critically for a little bit, you can just turn to your Doom box phone screen and you can hold it in front of you and you can type away, what should I think about this at Grok? Is this true? And then just let the artificial intelligence tell you what is true. Theoretically, this should be awesome because artificial intelligence, right? That's just a very abstracted form of computation. So technically, if logic is something that is basically our form of computation through ideas, we should be able to program some sort of artificial intelligence to have that logical system built in. So we should be able to reach all the right conclusions, right? The problem is that a lot of the premises that these artificial intelligence are built off of is within the hands of a very few amount of people. And all of those people, those few amount of people, are a bunch of losers in Silicon Valley who have no moral fundamental principles at all other than how can I make the most popular product that's used by everybody. That is the basis of their premises for their logical thinking, because they went to school and in university they decided that the humanities were the worst subject that ever existed. The only thing that really matters is math and science, and they are now making that the world that we live in. Now, what's the takeaway of this? What's the conclusion? I just set up a few premises, I made a bunch of statements. Now you, the viewer, get to draw the logical conclusion at the end. What's my conclusion? Before you think of anything rash or think of doing anything rash, that's not my conclusion, okay? My main conclusion is the most boring one in the world, and that's that everyone should always value some sort of logical thinking. And whenever you see people reaching certain conclusions, whether or not you agree or disagree with it, make sure to ask yourself, what are the systems that they're using to navigate through all of these complex things that are happening in the world? What are their motivations? What are the premises, the core values that they're working with? How are they reaching the conclusions that they're reaching? So the next time you see anything like this online, just think about that. And one more caveat, because I just realized that that statement that I just gave can be used by anyone to reach any conclusion that they want. If any of your logical conclusions are very similar to a lot of people that you see on X.com or within the current ruling administration of the United States of America, something within your logical system is wrong. And you have to rework through it. That's a strong statement to say, and I know that anyone who's watching this, who is on that side or agrees with that group of people, are now going to take this whole video and be like, oh man, this guy was talking about logic all this time, but it just so happened that at the end of it, all of his logic kind of broke down. Is that true? Is that really true? If you nodded your head along with everything except for that final point, please rethink it. Rethink it a little bit. Or no, don't rethink it. If you really think that your position is the truly logically correct one, I challenge you to go and take every single political figurehead that you agree with, take the opinions that they're posting online, and try to fact check it. Try to get really good sources so everything is pretty much as objectively true as possible, and then try to reach the same logical conclusions. Does it still work? Or does it seem like they were actually either A, having false sources, their source of information was literally their f***ing mind, or 2, B, they're just straight up lying because the sources say what they are saying, but they're somehow just delusionally lying.